I'm going to have you, if you would, just kind of put your finger in the Bible at 1 Kings 17. I'm not going to read a lot to you about that story. It's a long, painful story. 1 Kings 17 and following. It's the story of Elijah. But it is intertwined with my story. Because when I was a boy, growing up in Tom Betty's house, being the oldest boy and having a lot of boys, they kept saying, Bob, you're going to follow in your father's footsteps. You're going to take on the family business, so to speak. I don't know that anybody's ever heard that before. Andrew, have you ever heard that kind of thing? All right. My answer was uniformly the same. Never varied. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I have watched what it takes to be a pastor. And I have witnessed the brokenness and the sorrow and the weeping for the needs of the church. The prayer list that you shared this morning. Friends of mine that are in the hospital today or going through the last stages of the cancer that is taking their lives. And when you love them and you care for them and you want God to work miracles and you want His Spirit to have power and authority over all of your precious people, you know what brokenness is. Brokenness of heart. And you have a passion to try and help people and encourage them, and sometimes they don't follow you and they don't want to. No, not me. Not me. I don't have that kind of heart. I don't have that kind of desire. I don't love people that much. You got to know that is not for me. And so when I got of a certain age and they started saying, what are you going to do? I went into business. I got my degree in accounting because I figured I was good at numbers. I was really, really good keeping that stuff straight. And then one day I'd been in business, I'd been doing great, and I'd helped a couple of organizations get back up on their feet and really going, and I was already built my new house and had my place out in the country, and I was doing fine. Went to church one Friday evening for a spiritual emphasis weekend. The pastor was up there speaking, not unlike what I'm doing here. I hope you have a little different reaction than I did. I didn't hear a word he had to say. Sorry, Harry Cattamore, for that. I blanked out on you. Because what God did was to take me to a different place. When I was growing up, you had things to look forward to. If someone came in on Sunday night and there was a projector set up halfway down the aisle, you're going to have fun in church that night, because the Christian movie was a real blessing. It was entertaining, and it was better than listening to a sermon by a lot, because it was fun. And you remember how they used to come in cases where you'd have two reels, and you'd put the first one on, and then about halfway through they'd have to spin that back on the original reel, and they'd have to put the second one on. God took me to a movie that night in church. He put the screen up in front of me, and he put the first reel on, and he said, just watch this and enjoy. It was a story of Elijah. And it started right there in 1 Kings 17. Ahab was a very, very bad man. One of the worst kings Israel ever had. And God wanted to send him a message. He wanted to make sure that Ahab knew he wasn't getting away with a thing. Not a thing was slipping by. God was going to hold him accountable, and it was going to be penalty for the sins of the nation. And there'll be no rain until I say so. Well, of course, that put Elijah, the prophet who had made the proclamation, on the top of the 10 most wanted list of Ahab and his police force and his army. So God just whispered a nice quiet word to Elijah, and he said, Go hide. Well, that was a no-brainer. And so God led him out into the wilderness, out on the far side of the Jordan River, back in the mountains. Way back in there, there's a little brook and a cave. And back in so far in the wilderness, the army couldn't see him. And I could see him sitting in the cave watching the dust roll as they patrolled back and forth trying to figure out where he was. And you could see the armies marching back and forth. And there he sat in the cave. Now, it wasn't real great accommodations. There was a little brook that came through. And God sent ravens with bread and meat every morning and every evening. Not exactly the best cuisine, but it was sustaining him. Bread and meat from the ravens' mouths. And the rain didn't come. And the rain didn't come. And the drought got longer. And the pressure got on more and more intense. And I'm watching the movie and I'm watching this thing happen. And Elijah's kind of sitting back there going, Lord, you're really showing him now. You're really getting the message across. Okay. Just one problem, Lord. The little brook that's my source of water is shrinking. I can almost see it get smaller every day. And I can see him kind of, well, maybe if I put a little dam along there and made a puddle and kept a cup underneath the drip off the edge of there and keep the pool kind of small so it won't evaporate too much, and then all of a sudden one day, not even a drip comes off and the pool is going to dry up. Now what am I going to do? Bread and meat in the raven's mouth was bad enough, but what am I going to do? And God said, I got a lady I'd like for you to talk with. It's a little lady. Why don't you go have a visit with her? And so Elijah takes off and he travels a long, long distance, and away he goes, and he gets way up north of Israel, way up in the foreign territory, and he says, wow, that's a long walk in a dry town, in a dry country. I sure could use a drink of water. And he came on this lady that was gathering up sticks. He said, would you get me a little something to drink? Maybe bring me a little cake or something. It's been a long time since I saw a raven fly by. And she said, I'll gladly provide you the drink, but this is the last little meal that my son and I are going to have, because as soon as this is gone, our food supply is gone, and we're just going to die. So you couldn't take our last meal. Elijah said, yeah, go ahead, prepare that for me. God will take care of things. And so she, almost miraculously, I can't imagine someone didn't know this guy, had no idea who he was, and fixed her last meal for she and her son and gave it to him. But when she went back home, there was enough oil in the vessel and enough flour in the cruse that she could make one more. It wasn't their last meal. And Elijah came to live in their home, and every day it was the same. Fix the last of what you had to share, and when it was time for the next meal, it was there again. And every day it was the same. And I'm just amazed. I'm sitting here going, well, you know, Lord, that's amazing that you could work that way. And every day a new miracle. You would really know that your spirit was with it. You could almost be a pastor if you knew that God was going to provide that way every single day. But you know, God doesn't work miracles like that anymore. If there was something really powerful that came along, I would even be considered, you know, I would know that you were there. It would be like a rock I could stand on, that I could be firmly planted in those times when you want to just give up. But of course, you don't work that way anymore. So I guess we'll just go ahead. And so the movie kept on going, and it was time. It'd been about 3 years since it had rained, and God said, okay, Elijah, it's time to go meet Ahab again. And they all drew together on the top of Mount Carmel. If you've been watching the news over the last year or so, you'll remember that Israel had some terrible, terrible forest fires that they weren't prepared for last summer. And they had to call in air tankers to put out the fire from all the different nations around Turkey and Russia, and the United States all sent tankers to try and put out the forest fire. Well, it was on Mount Carmel. That was Mount Carmel that was on fire. Okay? And it sticks out like a kind of like a peninsula out into the Mediterranean Sea. And so these tankers would swoop down and touch the surface of the Mediterranean Sea. They'd scoop it up and then they'd dump that water down over the forest on the Mount Carmel. And so there we are on Mount Carmel, and Elijah's got Ahab, and he's got all the people drawn together, and he's got all the 400 prophets of Baal together. He makes them a deal. He said, you know, you people have had 3 years of drought. Are you ready to see just who really does have the authority to make it rain again? You ready to look and see who really is God? I'll make a deal with you. We'll put 2 altars up, one to Baal and one to the Almighty God, the unseen God. And the first prophet that is able to call down fire and consume the sacrifice, don't put any fire under it, but the first one that calls down fire from heaven and consumes the sacrifice, that'll be the God we all worship. That seemed like a fairly good idea, especially with the idea that the drought might be over pretty quick. So everybody agreed. Elijah said to the 400 prophets of Baal, since you've got the biggest contingency here, you go ahead and start first. So they put the whole thing together, and they put the bull on the altar, and the wood, and the sticks, and they started calling on Baal to come and send fire to consume them. And morning passed by, and they got to lunchtime, and there's still no fire. And so things began to heat up in the afternoon. They thought, well, if we cut ourselves and we persecute our own bodies and we just bleed all over the place, surely Baal will see our passionate carryings on and he'll answer. And Elijah had been pretty quiet. He's watching them slice themselves and beat themselves and hammer themselves with chains and all kinds of different things to try and show how passionate they were about their worship of Baal. And still nothing. Got to be about 5 o'clock in the evening and said, there's nothing. Nothing. All day long you've prayed. There's nothing. Now Elijah starts taunting them. Maybe your God is asleep. You need to shout a little louder to wake him up. Maybe he's on vacation. Maybe you just have to wait. Your answer is on the answering machine. He'll get back to you when he gets back in town. You know the funniest one? He said, maybe he's relieving himself and he can't be bothered right now. Yes. The phrase in the scripture is called covering his feet. That's kind of a colloquial way of saying he's in the bathroom. Okay, he's covering his feet. Okay, now, finally it got to be about 6 o'clock or so in the evening, get toward evening prayer time. Elijah said, okay, prophets of Baal, you've given it your best shot. I got to give you credit, you did good. No fire, but you did. Amazing. My turn. So he went over to his altar, and in the quiet, he put the stones back up in place where they should have been to make an altar. And he took the wood, and he placed the wood up on top of the altar. And he took a bull, and he sacrificed the bull, and he placed that whole carcass up on there to make the evening sacrifice. And then he did something that nobody's ever seen anybody do before. He got a shovel, and he started to dig a trench around the altar in the dirt. Everybody going, Elijah, we knew you were weird. I mean, you camel hairs and eating wild locusts and all that kind of stuff out in the desert and ravens. But digging a trench? That doesn't have anything to do with the altar. He said, yes, it does. He said, I want 4 barrels of water. Go down to the shoreline and bring me 4 barrels of water. We're going to pour that over the altar so that you know that there's not a single spark inside this sacrifice that will ever bring a question as to where the fire came from. And so they went down and they got 4 big barrels. Back up the mountain, they poured them down over the sacrifice, over the bull, over the wood, and it ran down over the stone. It had been a long time since it's rained, so it just kind of disappeared. Elijah said, that's not good enough. I want 4 more barrels. And down the hill they went, back up they came with 4 more barrels, and they dumped it in there, and everything's all sopping and it's beginning to get soaked up, and that's not good enough either. And the movie just keeps going. As the 4 guys go back down there, 4 more barrels, back up, and this time when they pour the thing, it's so wet, and everything is so soaked up that the water begins to accumulate down in the trench that he's dug around the outside. Imagine how a dry ground, already soaked up to the point where it won't go down anymore. That's a lot of water. And he stood back about 3 steps. And he said, okay, Lord, everything's ready. Just like you said it should be. Show us what you got. Fire came out of heaven. So hot, so intense, that it completely evaporated the sacrifice. Completely burned to a toast the wood that was on the altar, no matter how soaked up it was. Burned so hot, it shattered and evaporated the stones of the altar. So hot, so intense, it came down and licked up every drop of water that was in the trench and was licking down into the dirt underneath the altar that was just kind of muddy and sipping it all up into the flame. And as soon as it happened, the people of Israel fell flat on their face and said, the Lord, He is God, the Lord, He is God. We're convinced. Elijah went out, slaughtered the 400 prophets of Baal, eliminated their influence from the community, and went back up on the mountain and began to pray. Okay, Lord, it's time to start the rain again. Said his servant, you see any rain coming? Servant, come back. No, no rain. Come on, I know there's going to be rain coming. Go take another look. No, no rain. Come on, I know there's rain coming. It's been 3 years. God told me it was 3 years it's going to come. Well, no, no rain. Oh, go back and look one more time. Well, he came back and he said, Elijah, I don't know if it's anything significant or not, but there's a little cloud on the horizon, just about as big as a man's hand. Couldn't be that big a deal. And Elijah said, that's the one! That's the one! Let's get out of here. And he went down past Ahab and he said, Ahab, you better head for town because it's going to be muddy in a minute. And Elijah started running alongside of Ahab's chariot, and they ran down to Elijah's hometown in the rain. It was just pouring. Mission accomplished. Everybody was going to worship the Lord, the God of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob. And now it was raining again. Perfect! Perfect! But that was the end of reel 1. And the lights came on, and they started doing that thing that they do back there with that Bell and Howell projector, and he was running it back and getting ready for the second reel. I didn't turn around because I knew what was happening back there. I've been a projector operator. I said, you know, Lord, any one of those things would be enough to convince me you were going to be with me. But man, that fire, that was awesome. That was great. You know, anybody that would ever have that kind of an experience would never, ever question their call to ministry again. Ever. No way. God didn't say anything. He just put the second reel on there and turned off the lights, and away we went. In the beginning of the second reel, Elijah walks up to his door of his home, and there's a note on the door. And it says, Elijah, you killed my prophets of Baal. Before 24 hours is up, you're going to be just as dead as they are. Signed, Jezebel, the queen. I thought it was over. I thought we won. It can't be. They know where I am now. I'm not hiding anymore. I'm exposed. I'm as good as dead. What's going to happen? And I could just feel his chest tighten up. He headed for the hills. That's where he was used to it. And he headed south just as hard as he could run. I mean, he ran himself into total exhaustion, fell out in the desert in the sand, crying out to God in the worst possible anguish of heart, saying, I'm dead. Go ahead and kill me right here. My life is over. And in exhaustion, he fell asleep. A few minutes, hours later, whatever it was, he woke back up. There was an angel sitting there. Had a little fire, had a little food, had a little drink. Didn't have any answers, just a little food and a little drink. Here, have something, refresh yourself. And he did. He went back to sleep again and woke up again. The angel's still there, still cooking food. Like Denny's, it was always there, you know. We'd walk in and have some. Doors never closed. After he'd gotten fully refreshed, he went ahead and started running then. He ran all the way down into Mount Sinai, the mountain of the Lord. And he hid in a cave. Now, in this cave, it's not real deep. And there's two big old round boulders sticking out of the back wall. And there's just about enough room between those boulders that a guy can get his shoulders down in there and pull his legs up underneath his chin. And that's where I saw Elijah hanging out between the big old boulders, hiding from Ahab and Jezebel and the army. And mumbling to himself something about, I don't think I'm ever going to be the same again. I think my life is over. I think God stopped talking to me. And then something happened. The earth began to shake, began to rumble and roar. And he thought, I wonder what that is. He went out to the door of the cave, and he's halfway up the mountainside, and the mountain is quivering, and the earth is shaking, and rocks start tumbling down the side of the mountain, and there's a dust cloud coming over him, and there are pebbles hitting him in the head, and he's trying to get out there. Maybe this is an earthquake that God has sent to speak to me. Well, he listened real hard, and he got several lumps on the head, out there unprotected, trying to hear God's voice, and when the dust began to settle, no voice, no God, no message. Now he's discouraged. But it's not too late. Suddenly there's a wind that starts to pick up. And brush and sage bush and all kinds of stuff start blowing around, and the dust is whipping around, and he thinks, maybe this is what God sent to speak to me. And so he pulls his cloak up over his face to keep the dust out, and he's out there right out in the wind, and it's tearing him apart. And he's going, I'm waiting, Lord, I'm listening. But when the wind died down, there was no voice. And so he started to turn and go back in the back of the cave, and noticed that down at the bottom of the mountain there was a smoke cloud. And a mighty, powerful wildfire was coming up the side of the mountain. A flash fire that just consumed everything that would burn. All the way up the whole side of the mountain. He said, the earthquake, the wind, may not have been God's way again, but the fire, certainly the fire. And he went out so close, and he got so hot that his eyebrows singed off as he was waiting to see, get his ear turned as close as he could to hear God's voice, and there was nothing. Now, after the earthquake, the wind, and the fire, he's really discouraged. And he sneaks himself back, and he puts his shoulders down between those two boulders, and he sits there and weeping. Weeping. I'm too far away to even hear God's voice. The end of the movie is coming. I can see it happening. Can't be much more film left on that reel. And God uses that next minute to whisper to Elijah, Elijah, why are you sitting in this cave, hiding? I have work for you to do. And you can't do it sitting here in this cave. I have important stuff. There are kings that need to be anointed. There are prophets that need to be trained. There is stuff that absolutely has to be done, and you can be involved in it if you're faithful. And leave this cave and get back on the job. Now, by this time, I'm angry, Elijah. I'm saying, Elijah, you should have remembered the Mount Carmel experience. Didn't you remember? Don't you remember the little boy that you brought back to life? Don't you remember the food, the oil, and the flour in the vessels? Don't you remember the rain that came after 3? Elijah, you should have been remembering. Why would someone who has seen so much of God's power lose their confidence in him so quickly? Shame on you, Elijah! And then God took those fingers of accusation and in slow motion turned around this way and pointed them right at me. And he said Elijah was faithful. And he did change the world. What are you going to do? The windows on that side of the church at that moment were clear. And the business property that I was going to buy was just across the street from the church. I could see it from where I sat. And I glanced over that direction just real quick to see if it was still there. God saw my glance and he said, yeah, you can do that. You got your education, you got your experience, you can do that. How can I bless you if you can already do it? What do you need me for? What I'm asking you to do is so tough, you can't do it for one day. Not even one single day without my grace, without my strength, without my spirit. It's impossible. But I don't care about people that much. I'm not a very loving, warm people person. I'm kind of doing my own thing. Yeah, I said, what I'm talking about. That's exactly the point. I said, okay, Lord. No wind, no earthquake, no fire. Just the word of the Lord said, what are you going to do? And you went from being a hard lump of clay that you couldn't do anything with, and that's where I was, to being a vessel that could be shaped and formed and changed into something he could use. The point I come to with sharing that story with you is not only is the story of Elijah a powerful story, man of faith. A man who was so faithful, God didn't even want him to go through the process of death. Scooped him up in a chariot of fire and took him home to be with him forever. A man of faith. But the story and the truth of what he had to say is still in effect today. You're seeing the result. 3,000 years later, there's a guy standing here because Elijah said, okay, I know it's dangerous out there. The army's still looking for me, and Jezebel's nobody to be trifled with. But if that's what you want, and it's just as effective for you. I don't know whether you're facing a diagnosis that the doctors all say, sorry, there's nothing more I can do. I don't know if you're facing an economic reality that says, you have had it. You're done for. You're flat broke. I don't know whether emotionally you're so drained and feeling so empty that you can't hardly even lift your chin up for another day. I don't know whether you're feeling spiritually so drained and so ugly on the inside that you say, God will never love me. God will never take care of me. God will never be gracious enough to forgive me. Whatever it is. I'm telling you, you can't hide in a cave deep enough that God can't speak to you and change your life. You can't get in a spot so hard and so tough and so bad that he can't work miracles and do amazing things in your life. There is not one place you can run to so far away that his Spirit cannot reach out and transform your mind. He did for me. And he can for you too.